12 days before Christmas 1945, a hospital room in Heidelberg, Germany. A 60-year-old American general lies paralyzed from the neck down. His wife sits beside him in the chair no wife should ever have to sit in. His eyes are open. He knows he is dying. And he knows something else. He knows he was right. 7 months earlier, at a Soviet victory banquet somewhere in occupied Europe, this same man stood up in front of a Russian general, refused a toast, and said 7 words that a translator was afraid to repeat. Within months, he lost his army. Within a year, he lost his life. And within 4 years, everything he had warned America about came true. If your father served in the Third Army, if your uncle rode into Bastogne in the winter of '44, if you grew up hearing the name Old Blood and Guts around Sunday dinner tables in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Texas, then this story belongs to you, because the man they called Patton did not die of a car accident. Not really. He died of what he saw. And what he tried to tell us, his name was George Smith Patton Jr., and to understand how he ended up in that Heidelberg hospital bed, we have to go back 7 months, to the day the war ended, to the day everyone in the world was celebrating, except him, May 8, 1945. The war in Europe is over, in Times Square. Sailors kiss strangers, in London. Crowds pour into Piccadilly Circus, in Moscow. 1,000 cannons fire salutes into the night sky, but in a small headquarters near Bad Tölz in the Bavarian mountains, one man is not celebrating. He sits at a wooden desk. A single lamp burns above him. He is 59 years old, tall, sharp-jawed, with pale blue eyes that have seen more killing than most men can imagine. His name is George Smith Patton Jr. He commands the United States Third Army, and in his personal diary, on this night of universal joy, he writes 7 words that history will not forget. We have defeated the wrong enemy. He puts the pen down. He looks at the map on the wall. Red arrows curl across Eastern Europe like a bloodstain. The Red Army is in Berlin. The Red Army is in Vienna. The Red Army is in Prague. And in his mind, it is not stopping there. This is the story of what happened next. The story of a general who saw the Cold War 45 years before the Berlin Wall fell. The story of a banquet, a Russian officer, a glass of vodka, and a sentence so brutal that the translator was afraid to repeat it. But before we can understand the insult, we have to understand the man. George Smith Patton Jr. was born in California in 1885. He came from a family of soldiers. His grandfather died fighting for the Confederacy. His father wanted him to become a lawyer. He wanted to become something else at West Point. He failed his first year in mathematics. He was told he would never amount to a soldier. He repeated the year. He graduated in 1909 and swore to himself that he would prove them all wrong. In 1912, he travelled to Stockholm. He competed in the modern pentathlon at the Olympic Games. Fencing, shooting, swimming, running, riding. He finished 5th. 4 Swedes beat him. He never forgot the taste of that defeat. He designed his own sword, the M1913 cavalry sabre, which the army still calls the Patton sabre. He wrote poetry in secret. He read Julius Caesar in Latin. He believed genuinely, seriously, that he had lived before, that in another life he had been a Roman legionnaire, that in another he had ridden with Napoleon into Russia and frozen to death at Borodino. To Patton, war was not something he did. It was something he was in the First World War. He led America's 1st tank battalions into combat in France. He was shot through the thigh at Meuse-Argonne. He kept commanding from a shell hole until he passed out from blood loss. Between the wars, when the world wanted to forget about soldiers, he polished his boots and waited. Then Hitler came, and Patton became the man he had always been born to be in North Africa. He took a broken Second Corps and turned it into a fighting force in 6 weeks. In Sicily, he raced the British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery to Palermo and won. And then, in August 1943, in a field hospital in Sicily, he made the mistake that nearly ended his career. There was a soldier, trembling, weeping, suffering from what the doctors of that era called shell shock. We would call it combat trauma today. Patton called him a coward. He slapped him. He drew his ivory-handled pistol and threatened to shoot him. Then, a week later, in another hospital tent, he slapped a second one. The story reached the American press. Congress demanded his head. Eisenhower, his old West Point friend, saved him. But Patton was benched for 11 months. He was punished by silence, watching from England while other men landed at Normandy without him. Then came the summer of 1944. Then came France. Then came the racing armour across the Loire. And then came the moment that would define him forever, December 1944. The Ardennes. In the middle of a blizzard, 20 German divisions smashed into the thin American lines. Bastogne was surrounded. The 101st Airborne was cut off, freezing, low on ammunition, low on hope. Eisenhower called an emergency meeting at Verdun. He asked his generals how long it would take to counterattack. Patton said 48 hours. The room went quiet. It was considered impossible. He was already fighting a different battle 90 miles to the south. To disengage an entire army, pivot it 90 degrees, and attack in 3 days across frozen mountain roads in the worst winter Europe had seen in a generation, it had never been done in the history of warfare. Patton did it in 48 hours. His Third Army broke through. Bastogne was relieved on December 26, and in the months that followed, from January to May, his men were in continuous combat for 281 days without pause. They crossed 24 major rivers. They captured over 12,000 towns. They took 81,000 square miles of enemy territory. His Third Army claimed to have killed, wounded, or captured over 1.5 million German soldiers, more than 6 times its own strength. By April 1945, Patton was a legend. He was called Old Blood and Guts. He was on the cover of Time magazine. He was arguably the most feared American general still standing. And then, in the last 2 weeks of the war, everything he believed came undone. April 25, 1945, a river in eastern Germany called the Elbe. An American lieutenant, 23 years old, walks across a broken bridge near the town of Torgau. His name is Albert Kotzebue. He carries no rifle in his hands. On the other side, 3 Soviet officers wait for him. They cannot speak English. He cannot speak Russian. So they speak German, the language of the enemy they have both come to destroy. They shake hands. Photographers take the picture. It runs on the front page of every newspaper in the free world. American boys and Soviet boys, arm in arm, on a bombed-out bridge over a grey German river. The war is almost done. The alliance has held. The propaganda men in Washington and Moscow call it the spirit of the Elbe, but George Patton is not there. He is 300 miles south, standing on a hill outside a Czech town called Pilsen. His forward reconnaissance elements are inside the city. His maps show a straight paved road, less than 60 miles long, running east to a capital that has just risen in revolt. Prague. The Czech resistance has taken to the streets. They are fighting the last SS units left in the city. They are calling on Allied radio in French and English, begging for help. Their transmitter operator repeats one phrase over and over: the Americans are coming. The Americans will come. Patton has the fuel. He has the men. He has the momentum. He has a straight road and 48 hours of daylight. He sends a coded message to Eisenhower, directs permission to advance on Prague. The answer comes back within hours. Opposition denied. Hold your positions. Patton stares at the paper. He turns to General Hobart R. Gay, his chief of staff, a 51-year-old cavalryman from Illinois, who has stood beside him from Casablanca to Bavaria. Patton hands him the message. He does not speak for a long time. When he finally does, the aides in the tent look at their boots and pretend not to hear, because Patton understands, in that moment, what most of the world does not yet understand. The war against Germany is over, but the war for Europe has just begun. 2 days later, on May 6, the Red Army enters Prague from the east. The Czech uprising is crushed by the last German SS units before the Soviets fully arrive, and the Soviet flag goes up over Wenceslas Square. Patton, 60 miles away, does not sleep for 2 nights. He writes in his diary that night, the same words again pressed into the same worn pages: savages, Mongols, and now they own half of Europe. He is a man of his time. He is a man of his own dark prejudices. He will say things in the coming weeks about Jewish survivors, about Poles, about ordinary German civilians that no serious historian defends today. On many questions, Patton is on the wrong side of history, and the record is clear. But on the question of Russia in May 1945, he is looking at something real, because 1,000 miles east, in Poland, in Hungary, in Romania, the Red Army is not going home. It is digging in, it is arresting priests, it is loading political prisoners onto trains. Countries that spent 4 years under German boots are now falling under Soviet ones. The word for what is happening does not yet exist in the English language. In 1 year, a defeated old British Prime Minister named Winston Churchill will stand up at a small college in Missouri and invent it. He will call it the Iron Curtain. George Patton sees it coming in May 1945. 10 months before the phrase is born. And now we come to the banquet. Every book, every documentary, every Hollywood film will tell you the same story. That George Patton, at a victory party thrown by the Russians in the spring of 1945, was offered a toast by a Soviet general. that he refused the drink, that he looked the man in the eye and called him, loudly, deliberately, in front of the whole room, a Russian son of a bitch. The story has been told 10,000 times, and now I have to tell you something uncomfortable. The exact moment, the exact wording, the theatrical silence you have seen in the 1970 film with George C. Scott, we will come back to that scene in a moment, because what really happened in that dining hall and what the movie showed you may not be the same thing. But here is why the story survives, because Patton, in his real letters, in his real diary, in his real conversations with real staff officers, was saying things that were worse. He was writing them in ink, he was signing his name to them. And by the summer of 1945, when he sat down at a table full of Soviet officers with vodka in front of him and enemy medals gleaming across the room, every man there already knew what George Patton thought of the men he was drinking with. And they knew what he was about to try to do. He was going to try to start another war. While the world was still burying the dead from the first one, May 1945, somewhere in Austria, on a country road east of Linz, a black American staff car winds through the summer light. Inside sits General George S. Patton Jr. He is going to meet a man he despises. The Soviets have invited him to a review. A parade of the 3rd Ukrainian Front. Their commander is Marshal Fyodor Tolbukin. He is 50 years old, heavy-set, sick with diabetes, though nobody outside his staff knows it yet. In 3 years, he will be dead. But today, in this Austrian meadow, he stands ramrod straight in a grey Soviet greatcoat, waiting for the famous American to arrive. Patton steps out of the car. He does not smile. What follows is one of the strangest afternoons of his life. For 2 hours, thousands of Red Army soldiers march past the reviewing stand. Infantry in their thick brown uniforms. T-34 tanks, the same tanks that broke the German army at Kursk. Katyusha rocket launchers on the backs of American Lend-Lease trucks. Cavalry units, still a hallmark of the Red Army, riding past in tight formation. The Soviets have brought out everything. They want to impress him. They want to intimidate him. Patton watches. His face gives away nothing. But that night, back at his own headquarters, he takes off his helmet, sits down, and tells his staff exactly what he saw. His words survive because his aide wrote them down. They are, he says, the shabbiest bunch of sons of bitches I have ever seen. He criticizes their uniforms. He criticizes their marching. He calls their discipline a mob. Then he pauses and he says something else. He says, but they are tough. And if we do not fight them now, we will fight them for the next 50 years. He was off by 4 years. The Cold War would last 46. Now, before the toast, before the insult that everyone thinks they know, let me pull you inside a Soviet banquet in the summer of 1945. Because if you have never been to one, the American mind cannot quite picture it. The tables are draped in red cloth. Bottles of vodka stand every arm's length. Caviar in bowls. Black bread. Pickled herring. Boiled potatoes, officers in dress tunics, medals so heavy the fabric bends, 60 men, 80 men, 100 men, and the ritual the Russians toast to Stalin. You drink. They toast to Roosevelt, dead 1 month now. You drink. They toast to the army. You drink. They toast to the fallen. You drink. Each shot is 1 full glass of vodka, not a sip, not a taste, the full glass. And to refuse is not manners. To refuse is an insult carved into stone. This is the world George Patton has been invited into, and this is the world where, according to the legend, the moment happened, a senior Soviet officer stands up. He raises his glass. The room falls quiet. He looks across the table at the American. He offers a toast to the alliance, to the friendship, to the shared victory over fascism. He waits for Patton to drink. Patton, so the story goes, does not drink. Patton stands up instead. He looks at the Russian. He speaks through the interpreter, a young American lieutenant who is about to have the worst 30 seconds of his life. He says, "Tell the general I have no desire to drink with him, or any other Russian son of a bitch." The interpreter goes pale. He whispers, "Sir, I cannot say that." Patton stares at him. He says, "Tell him." Word for word, the interpreter turns. He translates. The Soviet officer listens, and in the version everyone loves to remember, the Russian smiles. He laughs. He replies that he thinks the American is a son of a bitch too. And Patton laughs, and they drink, one son of a bitch to another. That is the legend. And as I said earlier, part of it may be a Hollywood scene layered over a real man. But here is what is not legend. Here is what is written in his own hand, in his own diary, in cables that still exist in the National Archives. That summer, George Patton begins to say the unthinkable out loud. He tells his staff, in his headquarters at Bad Tölz, that the American army must not go home. He tells them the Third Army must stay in place. He tells them that the German soldiers now sitting in prisoner of war camps, hundreds of thousands of them, should be rearmed, given back their rifles. put in American uniforms, sent east against the Red Army. He writes to his wife Beatrice on the other side of the Atlantic. She is 59 years old, a small, sharp, brilliant woman who has been his companion since he was a young lieutenant. She has spent 35 years reading his letters. She is used to his rages. But this summer the letters change. He tells her the world does not understand what is coming. He tells her he believes he has been sent to warn it. He tells her, in his own words, that they will not listen. They didn't. Because in Washington, in London, in Moscow, the men who ran the world had one common belief. The war had to end. The boys had to come home. The alliance had to hold. And into this exhausted world on a hot September morning comes the strangest scene of George Patton's entire life, September 7, 1945. Berlin, Charlottenburger Chaussee, the wide central boulevard of the ruined capital. On both sides, buildings still smoke. The Reichstag, blackened, roofless, stands like a burned skull at the end of the avenue. The Brandenburg Gate, cratered by artillery, holds up its 4 bronze horses as if by memory alone. The Soviets have organized a parade of the 4 allies. Americans, Soviets, British, French, marching together through the ruin they created together. The Soviets have proposed that the 4 supreme commanders take the salute: Marshal Georgy Zhukov for the Soviet Union, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery for Britain, General Jean de Latte de Tassigny for France, and General Dwight D. Eisenhower for the United States. But days before the parade something happens. Eisenhower sends word. He will not be coming. He has, quote, other engagements. He is in fact going on holiday in the south of France. Montgomery cancels too. Only the Soviet and the French supreme commanders will now show up. The Kremlin is furious. Stalin sends a message to Zhukov. He says, they wish to reduce the meaning of our victory. Take the salute at yourself. And Eisenhower, that same week, orders George Patton to fly to Berlin, to stand in his place. Think about that. Read it slowly. The one American general in Europe who has said, out loud, in writing, that the Soviets are savages, that they are Mongols, that they should be attacked and driven back into Russia. That is the man Eisenhower sends to stand next to Zhukov on the reviewing stand, on the biggest ceremonial day of the year, in front of 20,000 Berliners and the world's newsreel cameras. Patton does not refuse. He puts on his best uniform, he polishes his helmet, he clips on his 4 stars, he flies to Berlin, and for 2 hours on that September morning he stands beside Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the man who conquered Berlin, 48 years old, chest heavy with Soviet gold, hero of the Soviet Union. Twice they salute each other. They speak through interpreters. They are polite. The parade begins. Soviet infantry march past first, then British, then French, then American, then the tanks. And here is the moment that men who were there would remember for the rest of their lives. Down the boulevard, past the Brandenburg Gate, come 52 heavy tanks. Their engines roar so loud the ground vibrates beneath the reviewing stand. Their tracks throw sparks off the cobblestones. Their guns are enormous, thick-barreled, aimed forward, and the shape of them is like nothing the Western Allies have ever seen. They are Joseph Stalin Two Eyes. The IS-3, the heaviest tank in active Allied service, unveiled to the West for the very first time. The Soviets have never shown them in public before. This is the debut. A British officer standing near Patton gasps. He asks, "Are those things dangerous?" And Patton, according to those who were there, turns his head slightly and says without emotion, "Relax. They are with us, for now." Those 2 words, unspoken but hanging in the air, are the whole story of the Cold War in a single moment. The Soviet tanks, once designed to smash Nazi armor, now paraded through Berlin as a warning to the men standing beside them. And Patton, the man who was not supposed to be there, standing on the wrong side of a divide that was already forming in front of everyone's eyes. He goes back to Bavaria that night. He does not sleep well. Something has broken in him. He begins to talk more. Not less, in the second week of September, at his headquarters, he has a conversation with General Joseph McNarney, Eisenhower's deputy. What he says is so extreme that McNarney will remember the words for the rest of his life. Patton says, quote, "In 10 days I can have enough incidents happen to have us at war with those sons of bitches and make it look like their fault." He is 59 years old. He is a 4-star general of the United States Army. He is proposing to another American general that they manufacture a war. McNarney says, "George, you are mad." Patton says, "I am no diplomat. I am a soldier." Somewhere in that same week, in an office in a nearby city, a young lieutenant of the American Counterintelligence Corps sits down at a desk with a stack of typewritten transcripts. They are transcripts of General Patton's private conversations, his phone calls, his dinner table remarks, his outbursts in the mess. The United States Army is now bugging its own most famous general. Nobody has ever confirmed, publicly, whether Eisenhower personally gave the order, but the transcripts existed. They still exist in fragments in American archives, and by the third week of September they have been read by men in Frankfurt, in Paris, and in Washington. They are horrified. They are also afraid, because Patton is not just talking. Patton is still a household name. The American public, exhausted and grieving, remembers him as the man who saved Bastogne. His face has been on magazine covers throughout the war. His name still opens doors on Capitol Hill. If he goes public, if he takes a microphone and tells the American people that the Soviets are the next Hitler and that their boys must fight one more war, there will be congressmen who listen. There will be voters who agree. Something has to be done. Somebody has to shut him up. And on September 27, 1945, on a warm afternoon at his headquarters in Bad Tölz, George Patton hands the men in Washington the excuse they have been waiting for. He calls a press conference. Reporters gather around him. American reporters. British reporters. Wire service men in dusty jackets with notebooks flipped open. Patton is being questioned about denazification, about the policy of removing former members of the Nazi Party from every position of civil authority in occupied Germany. Patton is tired. He is angry. He is thinking about the Soviets, not about the question. He waves his hand. He says, "This Nazi thing, it is just like a Democrat and Republican election fight back home." The reporters stop writing for a second. They look at each other. Then they start writing very fast. By the next morning, the story is on the front page in New York, in Washington, in Chicago, in London. General George S. Patton, hero of the Third Army, liberator of France, savior of Bastogne, has just compared membership in the Nazi Party to being a Democrat or a Republican. The White House explodes. President Harry Truman. 61 years old, a former Missouri farmer with a tailor's precision and a haberdasher's temper, reads the newspaper over breakfast. His face turns red. He picks up the phone. He calls the War Department. He wants Patton out. In Frankfurt, Dwight David Eisenhower reads the same newspaper. He is 54 years old. He has known George Patton for 30 years. They served together in the Tank Corps in France when they were both young lieutenants. They rode horses together in Kansas in the 20s. He has fought for Patton, protected him, saved his career after the slapping incident in Sicily. He has taken political blows for him again and again and again. He is done. He picks up the phone. He calls Bad Tölz. He orders Patton to fly to Frankfurt immediately on September 28, 1945, in a large office on the second floor of the IG. Farben building in Frankfurt, the two old friends face each other across a desk. There are no witnesses. What was said in that room, nobody knows exactly. But when Patton walks out, he is no longer the military governor of Bavaria. 9 days later, on October 7, in a small ceremony under a grey sky, he stands in front of the men of the Third Army for the last time. The army he built from nothing, the army that had killed and captured more Germans than any other force under American command. He hands the flag to the next commander. He salutes. He walks away. And an aide will remember decades later that the general did not speak for the entire ride back to his quarters. He was 60 years old. He had 75 days left to live. Bad Nauheim, Germany. October 1945, a small spa town in the hills north of Frankfurt. Before the war, wealthy Germans came here to take the mineral waters. Franklin Roosevelt himself was treated here as a young man for his heart. Now, the town's largest hotel has been converted into the headquarters of a new American command, the 15th United States Army, an army in name only, 367 officers, 3,090 enlisted men. No tanks, no artillery, no mission except to compile the historical record of what the American Army did in this war. This is George Patton's new command. He arrives on October 8th. He walks through the lobby of the hotel where dukes and duchesses once vacationed. He climbs the wide staircase to his second-floor office. He sits down at a desk stacked with unfinished reports. He looks out the window at a garden turning brown in the autumn cold. He picks up a pen. He writes a letter to his wife Beatrice. 5,000 miles away in Massachusetts, the letter has been preserved. In it, he writes one sentence that historians have quoted for 80 years. Ike is bitten with the presidential bug, and he is also yellow. The friendship of 30 years is over. The days that follow settle into a strange rhythm. Patton wakes early. He walks his white bull terrier, Willie, through the wet grass of the hotel lawns. Willie is the dog he took across France. Willie was there at Bastogne. Willie will outlive him. He reads reports, he signs papers, he receives visitors. Old officers from the Third Army come to pay their respects. Some cry when they see him in this small office. He does not cry back, but at night, according to the servants at the hotel, he sits alone in his room with a bottle of bourbon and a portrait of his younger self on the wall, and he does not speak. He is planning to go home. He has told his wife, in careful letters, that he intends to resign from the United States Army when he returns to America. He is going to leave the profession he has spent his entire life inside. He is going to write books. He is going to tell the truth about what he saw in Europe, about the Soviets, about what he believes is coming. He begins working on a memoir. He calls it War as I Knew It. He will not live to finish it. November 11, 1945, his 60th birthday. He is alone. He receives a few telegrams. Beatrice sends him a card. His daughters send letters. There is no cake. There is no ceremony. He sits in his office and he writes in his diary that a man of 60 should not be at war anymore, but neither should he be at a desk. He does not know what he should be. 3 weeks later, on December 8, he tells his chief of staff that he is planning to go pheasant hunting the next morning. It is a Sunday. He has invited General Hobart R. Gay to come with him. Gay is 51. He is Patton's oldest colleague still in Europe. They served together in Casablanca, in Sicily, in Normandy, in the Ardennes. Gay says yes. The general and the colonel plan the hunt. Neither of them will remember this evening the same way afterward. December 9, 1945. The morning is bitterly cold. The road is icy. A 1938 Cadillac Model 75 idles at the front of the hotel. Its driver is a young technician 5th grade, Horace Woodring. Everyone calls him Woody. He is 19 years old. He has been driving generals in Europe for less than a year. He is careful. He is quiet. He has never had an accident. Patton climbs into the back seat. He is wearing a heavy overcoat, wool trousers, riding boots. Willie the Bull Terrier hops onto the seat next to him and curls into the corner. Hap Gay gets in beside Patton. The Cadillac pulls away from the hotel just after 9 o'clock in the morning. They drive southwest through the winter countryside, small villages, bare trees. Roads still marked by tank tread damage from the spring. Patton is in a good mood. He is talking. Gay will later remember that the general seemed lighter than he had in weeks. He was going hunting. He was outdoors. He was, for a few hours, not a paper general. Near the town of Mannheim, they enter an area of destroyed railroad yards, twisted rails, blackened boxcars. The scars of American bombing, the Cadillac slows down for a railroad crossing. On the other side of the road, coming toward them, is an American Army truck, a 2.5-ton GMC. Its driver is a young Private First Class Robert L. Thompson, roughly 20 years old. He has 2 other soldiers in the cab with him. They have been drinking the night before. This is not authorized. Thompson has taken the truck without permission. The Cadillac and the truck close the distance. At the last second, without signaling, Thompson swings his truck to the left across the road into the driveway of a quartermaster storage depot. Woodring stamps on the brakes. The Cadillac hits the truck at less than 20 miles per hour. It is not a violent crash. There is no explosion. There is no fire. The dashboard of the Cadillac crumples. The steering wheel bends. Willie the dog is thrown to the floor but is not hurt. Woodring, the driver, is untouched. Gay, the general beside Patton, is untouched. The men in the truck are untouched. Only George Patton is hurt. He has been sitting upright, leaning slightly forward. When the car stops, his head is thrown forward into the metal frame between the roof and the windshield. His neck fractures at the 3rd cervical vertebra. His spinal cord is crushed. His scalp opens above his forehead. Blood runs down over his eyes. He is conscious. He cannot move. He says to Gay, in a quiet voice, "I think I am paralyzed." Then he says, "This is a hell of a way to die." They are the first words of the last 12 days of his life. They lift him out of the car. They put him in a passing vehicle. They rush him to the American military hospital at Heidelberg, 30 miles away. A team of surgeons is waiting. They stabilize his neck. They put him in traction. His skull is drilled and metal hooks are inserted so weights can pull his spine into alignment. Beatrice, in Massachusetts, gets the phone call in the middle of the night. She is on a military transport plane within hours. She flies through storms. She lands in Frankfurt. She is driven to Heidelberg. She walks into her husband's hospital room. She is 59 years old. She has been married to him for 35 years. He looks up at her from the bed. His eyes are the same. His body cannot move. For 12 days she sits with him. She reads to him. She talks to him. He talks back. He knows he is not going to recover. The doctors have told him. His diaphragm is failing. He is running fevers. He is developing pulmonary embolisms. Blood clots in his lungs on the afternoon of December 21st, 1945, at approximately 6 o'clock in the evening. According to some accounts, George Patton opens his eyes. He looks at Beatrice. He says, "It is too dark. It is too late." Other witnesses say he simply slipped into sleep and did not wake. Then he closes his eyes. He does not open them again. He is 60 years old. The war ended 228 days earlier. The news reaches the world within hours. The New York Times runs it on the front page. Newsreels play his funeral on movie screens across America. He is buried, at his own request, with his soldiers, in the American military cemetery at Ham, in Luxembourg, in a plain marker, no different from the 22,000 young men buried around him row after row of white crosses, the general in the middle of them. Now, before we end this story, we have to address something. Because you have heard it. And I would be dishonest not to speak of it. In 1979, 34 years after Patton died, a former officer of the American Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, gave an interview. His name was Douglas Bazata. He was in his 60s. He had lived a strange life, and he told a journalist that he had been ordered to kill General Patton in 1945, that the accident was not an accident, that he had used a specialized weapon in the car, and that a Soviet agent had finished the job in the hospital. In 2008, another book was published, this one by a journalist named Robert Wilcox. It repeated the claim, it added new details, it suggested a conspiracy between American intelligence and Soviet intelligence to remove a man who could not be silenced any other way. These claims have never been proved. The mainstream biographers, men like Carlo D'Este, who spent decades in the archives, have looked at the evidence and concluded that December 9, 1945 was a car accident, a drunken driver, an icy road, a general sitting too far forward in his seat, a tragedy that happens to ordinary men every day, that happened to a legendary one. But here is the fact that keeps historians up at night. His wife, Beatrice, when the American army asked for permission to perform an autopsy on his body, said no firmly, repeatedly. She never explained why. She took that silence to her own grave in 1953, when she died at the age of 67 of a ruptured aortic aneurysm while fox hunting on horseback. There will never be a definitive answer. There will only be this. That George Smith Patton Jr., the loudest man in the American army, the man who had shouted about the Soviet threat when no one else would say it, the man whose voice could have moved millions of American voters against Stalin, died in an odd and quiet way at a moment convenient to a great many powerful people, and the record was sealed by the woman who loved him. Was he right about the Soviets? He was, in part. The Iron Curtain descended exactly where he said it would. Poland was lost. Hungary was lost. Czechoslovakia was lost. The Cold War lasted 46 years. It cost trillions of dollars and untold lives in Korea, in Vietnam, in Berlin, in Cuba, in Afghanistan. In 1989, the wall fell. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Patton had been dead 46 years. Was he right that America should have fought a war in 1945 to prevent it? Almost no serious historian believes he was. The Red Army in 1945 was 11 million men. The American public was exhausted. A war between the victors would have killed millions more. The atomic bomb was still a secret only America held, but the Soviets would have one within 4 years. The most likely outcome of Patton's plan was not a shorter Cold War, it was a hotter one. He was right about the danger. He was wrong about the answer. That is the truth about him. Neither the hero nor the villain the movies have made him. A brilliant, difficult, prejudiced, far-sighted, near-sighted, loyal, cruel man. A man who saw one thing more clearly than everyone around him and could not see the thing next to it at all. He is buried in Luxembourg, row 19. Grave 118, if you go there, on any Sunday in autumn you will find American families standing in front of the marker. Old men in windbreakers, grandsons in blue jeans. They come from Ohio, from Texas, from Pennsylvania. Their fathers rode in his tanks. Their grandfathers took Bastogne with him. They stand there. They do not say much. They just look at the stone. And they think, some of them, of that afternoon in a Bavarian dining hall, when a Russian general raised a glass, and the loudest American in Europe stood up and said what he thought. In the movie, at least. In the legend that has outlived the man, he said what he saw. He paid for it. He was gone before Christmas. If this is the kind of story you have been searching for, the true stories of the men who saw further than the world was ready to see, then take a moment before you go. Subscribe. Let us find each other again next week, in another quiet room on another dark night, at another turning point where one man had to choose between silence and truth, because the ones who chose truth were rarely thanked, but they are the ones we still remember.